All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Week Ahead, a podcast by SBM Intelligence. I'm your host, Bisolans, and every Saturday we look at some stories shaping our continent. In our first story, governors from Nigeria's southern region, under the Southern Governors Forum, are grappling with the implementation of a new minimum wage and advocating for state-by-state negotiations based on individual financial capabilities. We unpack the implications of this move or the ongoing debate surrounding workers' compensation. Next, we examine the cost of a healthy diet, which has surged by 32% in just a few months, making it increasingly challenging for families to afford nutritious food. We explore the implications of this alarming trend. Lastly, the economic community of West African states is contemplating a substantial investment of up to $2.6 billion annually to establish a 5,000-man security force. We delve into the proposed budget and the potential role of this force in addressing the region's security challenges. Joining me for insights on these critical stories is Shay, Senior Analyst at SBM Intelligence. Welcome to the show, Shay.
Thank you, Peace.
Yeah, so on the first story, which is about Southern uh, governors. So I was wondering, can you please provide a summary of the key points discussed at the Southern Governors Forum meeting in Abeokuta?
Great. So we know that the conversation around minimum wage and workers' compensation has been ongoing for a while. At the federal level, the labor leaders, including the Nigeria Labour Congress and the Trade Union Congress, embarked on a 2-day, 3-day strike action that even resulted in a shutdown of the national grid, leaving Nigerians in darkness. So to resolve that or to find a resolution to that, because the labor leaders have been suggesting their own ideas and the government has been making counter offers and both parties have not been able to reach an agreement. Southern leaders or leaders of southern states in Nigeria came together in Abeokuta to discuss minimum wage and a number of other issues. And what they said, as you said in the introduction of the podcast, was that they would be open to negotiating their own minimum wage, what they would pay as minimum wage by each state, because of course we know that the revenue accrued to each state at the end of the month differs. And now with the um government granting the federal government or the courts granting the local government autonomy, the local government would also have to decide what they can pay as minimum wage. So that's a brief summary of what has happened.
All right, Shay, but I thought that the national minimum wage has become centralized under the federal government's authority. So I thought that the state governments and local governments were supposed to follow the minimum wage guidelines, the centralized minimum wage guidelines. So why exactly are the governors advocating for the decentralized minimum wage plan when the existing legal framework allows for a centralized system? What's going on?
Exactly. So that's it. According to the Minimum Wage Act that was signed into law in 2019, every employer or any employer of labor who employs above 25% is supposed to follow the law and pay the agreed national minimum wage. But even for governors and some states, we found that some states have not even implemented that 2019 minimum wage, which was 30,000 naira. As at last count, about 14 states had not implemented the 30,000 naira minimum wage. In fact, in the middle of June, this June that was just passed, was when Zamfara State started paying 30,000 naira. Before then, Zamfara was paying 7,000 naira minimum wage. So, although the law says one thing, the opposite has been the trend in Nigeria. And so that is why those governors are now coming together to say, rather than us follow the Minimum Wage Act, let's make it legal for us to pay whatever we can afford.
All right. So has there been any punishment or redress for governors and states that refuse to follow the minimum wage? Or are they just allowed
Well,
to do whatever they want?
the Minimum Wage Act prescribes some punishments. It prescribes a fine to be paid and a but governors in their own sense are politicians, and I'm sure that the political class at the would certainly want to cut the favors of these governors. So no governor or defaulting governor has been punished or penalized for not paying the 30,000 naira minimum wage. And that is not a situation that we expect to change soon, given Nigeria's political climate.
All right, but why are governors not able to pay the national minimum wage? I mean, despite increased funds from the federation accounts and an additional 5 billion naira from the federal government as of uh October 2023. So why have they not been able to comply with the standard?
Well, a number of things affect the ability of states to pay a certain amount as minimum wage. The first is that we have to examine what funds or what funds accrue to the states at the end of the month. We also have to check the budgets, the what states already want to spend on capital projects, on other things. Another thing is that we have to also look at the deductions. So states across the country have debt, both local and foreign debt, that is already taking up a chunk of their revenue at the end of the month. So really, what is left to some states is pittance, and so states like that cannot be expected to pay a minimum wage, especially when you consider states that are termed civil service states in local parlance. And these kind of states are where majority of the workforce are employed in the civil service, and so there is limited tax revenue that accrues to the state government. So these are some of the factors that could affect the ability of states to pay a certain amount as minimum wage.
All right, so this is a statement from southern governors. Has there been any statements from northern governors, or are they also have towing the same line that southern governors are towing?
Well, in the days to come, we expect that the northern governors, would may make a statement. It's not unlikely, but really it's to wait on the government and labor's negotiations to see how those talks progress. And then the state governors or the government can decide if there would need to be a bill sent to the National Assembly for an amendment of the National Minimum Wage Act. It's also left to be seen about how the organized private sector would react to these developments. So, would the organized private sector be mandated to pay the national minimum wage, which the federal government will be paying, or would they be paying what their state of business is paying, or what their local government? So these things remain to be seen, and we will monitor these events as they unfold.
All right, so I want us to go beyond governors for now to the central discourse on minimum wage. Right now, I don't even know whether to say that they reached an impasse in the discussions or in the negotiations. Because I know the labor unions proposed over 200,000, federal government is saying around 60,000. So where exactly is the discourse now? Which have they been able to reach an agreement? What should we expect from that side?
So for as regarding the national discourse on the minimum wage, the last that we heard is that the President Tinubu, asked the Minister for Finance, Mr. Wale Edo, to prepare a proposal on what is an acceptable minimum wage figure at the time that the labor called of the strike action. The federal government said it was willing to pay an amount above 60,000 naira. And so that is quite vague. And we also know that the Minister for Finance has submitted that proposal to the president. So it remains, and that is where the talks of 62,000 emanated. But it remains to be seen what the president decides. As it stands now, the ball lies in the court of the president. So we await his decision.
All right. So for the local government, so it means that for the local government, they will also have to negotiate with labor unions. How isn't that going to complicate the whole process? I mean, if
Yes.
federal government is negotiating theirs, and then state government, different states are negotiating, and then local governments negotiating, what exactly isn't going to lead to problems in the future?
Well, it may not necessarily lead to problems in the future, but at present, yes, it will complicate the processes. Um, but with the local government autonomy, I know that some of the talks that has been around is that the states where these local governments are based would initially deduct the salary payment or their wage bill from the local government's federation accounts allocation before the remaining funds are released to the local government for disbursement. This is to avoid a situation where staff of some local governments within a state are being paid while others are being owed. So this is to ensure like a uniform arrangement. So in the interim, if the government decides to go with this decentralized minimum wage system that the southern governors have proposed, we can expect that the minimum wage talks will extend a bit longer than what we anticipate, but it should ultimately resolve in a system that works for everyone. That is, if all parties decide to go with a decentralized arrangement.
All right, thank you, Shay. So moving on to the next story, which is about the cost of healthy diets. So reports show that the cost of healthy diet in Nigeria surged by 32% to 1,041 naira per adult per day in May 2024. Whereas in December 2023, it was 786 naira. So can you explain what factors are driving this steep increase in the cost of healthy diets in Nigeria?
Yeah, so really, when President Tinubu assumed office, one of the first things he did, well, apart from his popular subsidy removal and naira devaluation, was to declare a state of emergency on food security. And many multilateral or international agencies have also highlighted that Nigeria is at the brink of a food crisis. In some states, we know that the number of children who are being presented at hospitals with symptoms of malnutrition is increasing. And a major factor that is contributing to this is um, the insecurity problem in Nigeria's core farming states. And so this insecurity problem has prevented farmers, prevented them, pardon me, from going to their farms. According to a recent report by SBM Intelligence, farmers who are even able to go to their simple taxes to bandits and non-state actors. And so in some instances, we have where farmers have to pay at the point of planting, and then they have to pay a different amount at the point of harvest. Ultimately, it increases the cost of production of food in Nigeria. And when you consider that a lot of farming communities have been displaced, it means that a lot of Nigeria's arable land that would normally be cultivated is not being cultivated currently. And that when you juxtapose reduced agricultural production to with Nigeria's growing population, you see that there is definitely a shortfall. Another thing that has not helped is that the government, even though it has lifted um forex restriction on those 41 were there 41 items that were initially banned from accessing forex, even though the government has lifted those forex restrictions, you still have situations where some certain food items are still subjected to high import duties and tariffs. For example, wheat, which Nigeria is in huge demand for things like bread, for staples like spaghetti, is still subjected to import tariff above 60%. So these are some of the things that has contributed to reduced availability of food in Nigeria. Another thing that I would add as one of the factors that's contributing is that the devaluation of the naira has meant that the fertilizer and other farm inputs, I mean, that Nigeria imports, the cost of these items have already increased. And so these are all additional costs to the farmers. So these are some of the reasons to blame for Nigeria's food crisis.
All right, this is Nigeria where like our minimum wage is around 30,000 naira. And if you look at this current cost of healthy diet, it's around 1,041 naira. Then by the time we multiply it by 30 days, we would have over 30,000 naira, which is the minimum wage. Then we have around 30% unemployment rate. And of course, Nigerians spend most of their money on food. So how has this increase affected the Nigerian's family or the average Nigerian family's ability to access nutritious food?
So a report that was published by SBM Intelligence late 2023, I think October 2023, the income, because it's the income survey in-house, but it was talking about the cost of living in Nigeria. From that survey, we found that 97 a large number, or all on the average, the respondents who participated in the survey said they spent 97% of their income on food. And so they had to resort to getting loans from loan apps and cooperatives to meet their other needs, such as clothing and house rent. And of course, as expected, these Nigerian families have already cut back on uh, a large number of things that are seen as amenities or entertainments like cable TV and all of that sort. We during the survey we found that some people had even reduced the frequency of taking their cars out and opting to join public transport. So these are some of the living adjustments that Nigerian families have made just because they have to keep feeding their families. Of course, people are also making alternatives. So rather than go for tomatoes, for example, in making their stew, on social media, there is already the popular cucumber stew and recently the watermelon stew. So
Wow.
these are some of the adjustments that Nigerians are making in order to continue surviving.
I'm just very curious. So have you tasted the cucumber stew? Have you by any chance? Because I was
Not
thinking
not
of it.
yet,
In fact, I
not
shared.
yet, but I definitely look forward to tasting it.
Yeah, me too, me too. All right. So, the data shows that Ebonyi State reported the highest cost of LD diets at 1,225 naira per adult per day. And but Kano State had the lowest. So what peculiar challenges, I want to ask about Ebonyi State first. What peculiar challenges is Ebonyi facing in terms of affordability? Why exactly is the cost highest in that state?
Well, so for a state like Ebonyi, you it is a farming. They have farming communities, yes, but you know that states in the southeast have been dealing with the sit at home on Mondays and also the unknown gunmen issues. So these insecurity issues and the lack of or the reduced chance for productivity, if I could put it like that, because Monday is a major day of work, and when residents of a particular region are forced to sit at home, they certainly impact on the economy of such a state. So the insecurity issue caused by the issue of the unknown gunmen and IPOB protests now and then have certainly limited the ability of the farming communities within the states, and economic activities within the states and even within the region have reduced because of the sit at home. So all this would naturally affect um, the the economic state.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. But for Kano, I want to believe that Kano is also facing security issues of its own. So why is healthy diet this expensive in Kano?
Well, the thing is that compared to Ebonyi, you have a larger population in Kano. We all know how Kano is regarded as or described as one of the Kardashian states during Nigeria's election because of the large voter turnout within Kano state. And so when you compare Kano to other states within the northern region like Borno, you know that Kano is relatively safe or enjoys some more relative peace compared to a state like Borno. So farmers within Kano are able to still go on with their farming activities, although they've also reported having to pay bandits, taxes, and all these levies. But they are still able to farm, and also Kano has its huge population working for it. So it's not surprising that, and also perhaps when you look at the items that constituted NBSC's healthy diet, some of it may not necessarily be processed food. So it means that Kano's situation would be a farm to table, maybe direct from the farm to the table. So these are some of the things. So if these items have not gone through the manufacturing or the processing value chain, then it will remain relatively cheaper within a farming community or a farming state like Kano.
Yeah, I want to touch on recently we had this news that the government wanted to introduce genetically modified organisms like maize, Stella maize or something like that. What and people have tried to kick back and just oppose that because apparently people have been saying that it's not healthy, it's not like other like properly uh cultivated maize or other food. What do you have to say on that?
So for the conversation around the telomeres or the telomeres, I'm not sure about how it is pronounced. I wouldn't call it a genetically modified seedling. What it is instead is genetic selection. And
Okay.
so let me use an example that I think would resound better. When people couples are dating and they want to go for marriage counseling and things and get married, there is this medical screening that is
Yeah.
recommended. And then they say if you are AS and your spouse's genotype is also AS, you cannot get married. But AS has to marry AA. That is like genetic selection. So you are selecting who to marry. So in the case of this telomeres, the scientists that came up with this hybrid maize, for example, have now said, okay, these are the things that will cause these maize seedlings or these maize seeds and the crop to be resistant to major problems within Nigeria's farming communities like the army worm. And I think there are two other things that so in three in total that the telomerase is resistant to. I'm very sure of armyworm. So what they have just done is genetic selection, and they've done it to improve the yield. So it's normal within biology, within science, to sort of improve, not to modify per se, but to improve using the method of genetic selection. And all these, and these are some of the reasons why Nigerian farmers cannot compete with their international counterparts. So you have a situation, for example, where Nigerian cows that are domestic to Nigeria don't they only produce about, on the average, 1.6 liters of milk per day. Yet you have the Friesland breed of cows that produce up to 30 liters of milk per day. That shows you the gap. It means that just to measure up to what the cows abroad, Nigerian farmers have to buy more cattle just to meet up. So, but we've now had situations where Nigerian cows have now been crossbred with those Friesland cows, and we have Nigerian cows that are now producing up to 10 liters of milk per day. So all of this, I'm just making these examples to that Nigerian farmers are able to produce because we have a large population. We're all aware of that. And so technology with the right biology, we should be able to increase our agricultural output, especially when you consider that the world needs to eat. So apart from feeding our population, Nigerian farmers, Nigeria's agriculture has to grow to a place where it can export and earn forex like other countries do.
All right. Thanks for the education, because I think the sentiments generally that I've seen, they've been negative. So it's good to hear like a positive side to this. But what are the potential long-term consequences of this surge, like this increase in the cost of food, particularly in terms of malnutrition and food insecurity in Nigeria?
So the the long-term benefits are there, if I can use that word. It's severe. It's not something that will just manifest within 2, 3 years. It's things that will come up in 5, 10, 15 years, 20 years. But in the immediate term, it's that when families are unable to properly feed and properly nourish themselves, it's people who are well fed that can perform optimally in terms of the economy. They are the ones who can carry out economic activities that will earn them money that they will in turn use to pay taxes to the government. So it's a chain, and if the crux of it is broken, it's a bad situation to put it like that. So it's that it's only people who are well fed that can perform economic activities. It's only people who are well fed that can come up with innovations. We already know that when you're talking about the science and technology, STEM innovations, Nigeria isn't doing as well as its peers across the world. So these are some of the issues when you talk about child malnutrition, when you talk about the fact that children who are malnourished will not be able to grow up to be leaders or people who can compete with their peers from across the world. These are some of the issues. And you also have the security side to it, because it is when people are hungry that they become angry, and they um participate in unsafe or unethical activities. We already have the situation. We know how the issue of the out of school children has contributed to Nigeria's insecurity problem, because these children who are not in school are easy recruits for insurgents and non-state actors. So a similar situation can play out in a food crisis. So it's a situation that the government needs to urgently tackle and resolve.
Yeah, so what are the strategies, or I mean, in your opinion, what are some strategies that you can suggest to policymakers and stakeholders? What strategies can they implement to address the rising cost of eating healthily in Nigeria?
Yes, there are a number of things that can be done. Already, the Minister for Finance, Mr. Wale Edo, has submitted a proposal to the president, and one for an economic reform or revitalization. And one of the things contained in that document is that the government should temporarily allow food imports and to reduce duty, or I think waive duty, import duty on some agricultural items. This will, in the short term, it would reduce the prices of food items in the market. Another thing would be to actually formulate policies that would encourage investment, long-term investment in agriculture, in Nigeria's agriculture, and also the government should also try to attract capital. Now, this capital, we already have the Bank of Agriculture doing some. We have the BOI doing some, but Nigerian farmers need to be empowered. So it's not just about throwing money, but throwing money in the right places. So whether it's by fertilizer input, whether it is by reforming the laws to make sure that the availability of agricultural land or the process of procuring agricultural land is made easier. These are some of the things that can help to um, stimulate Nigeria's agricultural sector.
All right, moving on to the last story, which is on ECOWAS. So, on Thursday, ECOWAS met in Abuja, and they decided that they need up to $2.6 billion annually to establish a 5,000-man security force. So this happened to be one of the options considered. The other option was to have $41 for a 1,500 man force. So what necessitated the formation, or what is necessitating formation of a standby force? What are the key factors influencing this decision?
Yeah, from news reports, we can see that the ECOWAS standby force is seeking to, or ECOWAS is trying to achieve two things. Number one, counter terrorism and discourage the trend of um violent takeover of governments across the region. These are the two things, according to news reports, that is necessitating the activation of a standby force.
All right, but how effective has ECOWAS been over the years? I mean, how effective do you think this particular force or this particular decision will be, considering their trajectory over the years?
Well, ECOWAS has recorded some success in previous years. We know about the ECOMONG that carried out some peacekeeping missions in Liberia in the past. In recent years, though, sub-Saharan or economies within countries within the ECOWAS region have been dealing with their own economic issues, and so people are not as keen on um, the idea of ECOWAS or what ECOWAS stand for, especially after talks around the eco currency and having a unified currency across the region did not manifest, or those talks died along the line, if we may say so. So people within the ECOWAS region are not as keen as to whatever ECOWAS may be coming up with at this time, especially when you consider that even with Niger, ECOWAS sanctions did not materialize in much to get the UNTA to change their mind.
Yeah, you raise a good point there, but how does ECOWAS plan to mobilize and sustain the financial resources required for this option? Are there international partners, organizations? Are the contributions going to be from member states? How are they going to get the funding for this standby force?
Well, the funding primarily for ECOWAS activities, the funding really is usually from contributions from member states. So I'm sure that this would be a major source of funding. There could also be international funding, especially when you consider some countries that have economic interests to protect in the West African region. So it's not unlikely that ECOWAS could get international support.
All right, so the president of ECOWAS emphasized that the West African region is the epicenter of terrorism. So how does this shape the political urgency behind the standby force? And what should we expect from this organization, from this West African organization going forward?
Well, I don't know if this is the right time for the ECOWAS to be complaining about the West African region being the epicenter of terrorism. Nigeria has been battling the Boko Haram issue since as far back as 2009, 2010, when the Chibok girls. We've also had um, Islamic states, Indige and Asaru and all of that. So I think it's a bit late for ECOWAS to be complaining. Different countries or countries have had to set up a joint task force, a multi-country um, military response to the terrorism problem within the ECOWAS region. So I think it's a bit late, honestly, for ECOWAS to be trying to activate some standby force. In fact, the force shouldn't be standing by when there is an active terrorism threat in the region.
All right, we do hope that something substantial comes from this meeting and that a very reliable solution comes for this insecurity problem in West Africa. But thank you so much, Shay, for participating in today's episode. We had such a wonderful discussion. And to all our listeners, this podcast is by SBM Intelligence. For deeper insights into our work, please visit our website at sbmintel.com and remember to connect with us on social media. You can find us on X, on Facebook, and LinkedIn at SBM Intelligence. That's all we have for today. Thanks for listening. See you next time. Bye.